Hello. Come on, you can do it.
There it goes.
We are there. We are live for another deep dive. And it is Friday, sometime in America. What time is it where you are, Armando?
It's 2:00 here.
2:00.
In good old Indiana, flyover country.
Eastern time, which makes it 11 a.m. Pacific. You know what time it is where you are. You don't need me to fucking tell you. It is 6 a.m. here in Melbourne, Australia. We moved this a little bit later because it's 6 a.m. here in Melbourne, Australia. And I just didn't want to get up at 4 a.m, to be totally honest with you. So that was a bit selfish, and I don't apologize. I'm here with Armando from Creative Works. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing extremely well. Extremely well.
You are always doing well. You have one of the best attitudes of anybody I know in this business, and I love your energy, and I love being around you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, look, we're in the business of selling fun and selling, parties and events and just enjoyable experiences. How could you not be in a good mood when you work in this industry?
Look, it's interesting. There's a lot of people that I post sometimes. For those of you that follow me on Facebook, every once in a while I'll post something a bit what I consider inspirational to me, and I recently posted something about playing light. That we take things really seriously. We get caught up in the seriousness of what we're doing, and that's a mindset. And I try to remind people that life really can just be a game if you decide to play it that way. And so we're in the games business, so why not play it the whole thing as a game, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So thank you for joining me and joining us, guys. You all, for those of you that don't know, there's a chat window over on that side of the screen. I think the chat's available to everybody. So feel free to chime in. We'll be watching the chat, and if you have questions, you can post them there, and we'll try to catch all of them. And if we lost your question above the fold, don't be afraid to repost it. I do try to scroll back up, but I also try to stay present and trying to balance that with distraction. So let's jump in, man. Let's talk about let's just talk about the beginning, like Creative Works. Who are you? And where do you come from? Like, you guys have a deep history in this industry. Talk a little bit about the background.
Yeah, so my partner, Jeff Schilling, started the company 21 years ago. I'll be 22 years old this year. And it started with laser tag, right? That's where we grew up in, so to speak, and cut our teeth. Just this idea that we could create a better environment. And then in 2001, he actually built the location that I ran for 6 years. So we had a relationship just from me being involved at the early stages. And as life, you get older, you get married, you want to move on and have kids and whatnot. He goes, you just know too much, and you've got this great personality, this great experience, kind of like what you talked about. He's come do something for me. I don't know what you're gonna do. He's like, I literally have no idea what job you're gonna be in, but come work for me and we'll figure it out. And so that was in 2008. And I've been here, throughout that time, and a couple of years ago, then became his partner and joined the company on a ownership level.
Awesome. And I think Jeff he actually ran one of my laser tag arenas back in the 90s. And so Jeff and I go way, way back, and then I kind of ducked out of the business and came back in. And by then you guys were a huge force in the laser tag business. And so, yeah, awesome.
Well, and then just over the years, as we've grown and as the industry has evolved and technologies have evolved, we've added other things. We do mini golf, escape rooms, obviously virtual reality, laser mazes, mixed reality we're getting into. And I know we're going to talk about some of that, later, but that's just how it's evolved over time and kind of where we've gotten back to. And I think the biggest thing about, us that's made us unique on that journey is that because so many of us do have an operational background, right? We just have a different perspective, right? And we look at it differently because, I've spent 6 years knowing what it's like to have 30 birthday parties on a weekend day and how that chaos has to flow, throughout your facility.
And that's something that I find a lot of companies coming into the VR space from a software background, consumer games background, that don't really understand the market because they've never been in it.
Mhm.
They've never run a family entertainment center or a retail business of any kind, that they just underestimate what it takes from the operator's perspective. And they don't have that empathy that they need to build a solution that works. You know, I tell people, hell hath no fury like a birthday party mom scorned.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, I remember when I started Laser Storm and we installed our first location at Funplex, Bob Chatto's place, back in Littleton, Colorado. And, you know, we had, you know, lead acid batteries hooked up to car chargers to be able to charge them, right? This is like in 1989. And we, you know, and the batteries would die and the shit was held together literally with duct tape and crazy glue. And you know, we would run late on a Saturday afternoon when we had 20 birthday parties booked up, and we'd run 2 hours late. And man, you want to talk about stress and hell. We're behind the counter with angry moms and impatient kids. It's really stressful. And that's the thing that I just don't think a lot of solution providers coming into this industry, like, they should all go work as a party host.
No, very much so. I mean, it's one of those things and this is a great point, is you can look at a product and you can be like, hey, that looks really good. And I visited this place, but if you don't understand why it was designed in a certain way, or what its real purpose and what those things behind the scenes are that you're talking about, then you're going to miss something, right? Or you're going to miss that because you're designing in only a design office.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
In a sterile environment.
And I'll give you guys a really good example. And I hate calling people out, but it's going to get out there eventually anyway. So there's a company out of Russia called Platforma VR, and they were at IAAPA, and they had some technical issues at IAAPA because of Wi-Fi. That happens to everybody, right? I mean, the first time. By the way, if you're going to a trade show and you're planning on using Wi-Fi for a live demo, call me. But these guys, you know, they struggled. They got a location at Bally's. They made a big announcement for Las Vegas. They did a demo at CES. It was a bit rough. I kind of warned them that I didn't think they were ready for prime time. And they were like, yeah, but it's working in Russia. And, you know, and there's also this first site syndrome, right? Where, you know, you open your first site in your backyard and it works, and you're there all the time as an owner or a founder, and it does really well. And we'd had this at Funplex. Our very first location was probably our best performing ROI location out of 230 locations that we built, right? And zero latency in Melbourne, same thing. That first location in Melbourne is done. It's a bit of a unicorn. And these guys opened at Bally's, which is fucking Broadway, man. That's prime time, and they just got yanked out because they just weren't ready. And the operator underestimated what it was going to take too. Here's an experienced operator getting into VR. He runs a couple of businesses there at Bally's. He runs the Bodies exhibit, which is a pretty big franchise, right? Which is like a museum, a touring thing. And then he runs a horror escape room. And he, you know, thought, oh, how hard can VR be? And I met with him before, and I said, dude, you might be in over your head. Call me. No, I got this. And the whole thing was a fucking shit show, and they wound up getting yanked out by Bally's. And so, yeah. So anyway, if you're not ready, you're not ready, and you got to have some self-awareness to that. I don't know how we got off on that rat hole. Sorry. So let's get back to you.
We were talking about just that idea of having that experience, being in, being in that operations side, and making sure that you're accounting for the operator's perspective and the throughput and what the customers are going to put your product through when you're designing it. You know, whatever that product is, whether it's for an entertainment center or not. Because, you know, like you said, if we bring up IAAPA and you even take the Wi-Fi issues that some people had aside, there were a lot of functional issues far beyond Wi-Fi on some products there, you know, VR and otherwise, where if you can't make it through a 4-day trade show without having major malfunctions or downtime, how on earth are you going to make it through, you know, weekends back to back with thousands of people touching your product?
Yeah. Yep. And I totally agree with that. And companies go to shows all the time, and then they make excuses, or they're just, that's the other thing I see too. And we're off on a bit of I think this goes to your experience. And one of the reasons that I brought some of my clients to you guys, because I know you get this, is, you know, there's this idea of working what's the definition of working in this industry?
Right.
And if you come from a software background or a technical background, and you're delivering a stack, right? You've got hardware, you've got software, you've got effects, you've got all of this stuff. But the operator's buying a product, and if one piece of the stack isn't working from your perspective, you might just say, oh yeah, well, that piece of the stack isn't working, but everything else is functioning okay, and think that it's a 2% issue, where the operator's saying, oh, my product isn't working right, it's broken. And that disconnect is one of the biggest ones that I see in the industry for solution providers. Talk about that.
Well, I think, and I can't believe I'm going to give them kudos, because I'm definitely much more I like the technical and the customization that goes with an Android phone. So, but it goes to the Apple premise, right? Why has Apple been so successful with their product? And it's because it works, right? You give up certain amounts of bells and whistles at times and freedom at times, because in a functional environment, it just works, and it doesn't require the same level of technical know-how that maybe Android did, at least in the early days, let's say, of Android. They've obviously gotten a lot better. But the same thing is now going to apply to your product when you're developing it. Is you are trying to create this product, this VR concept that is going to just work. It's got to be able to work on that Saturday from the time the venue opens at 10 a.m. until they close at 2 a.m. or whatever their hours happen to be.
Yeah. So Mark Minster says, what is this and why am I watching? And that's a great question. And so for those of you that are new to this, what I do each week is I find somebody who's doing what I think is interesting work or amazing work in the VR, location-based VR space, or VR in general. We're going to start expanding the speaker list a little bit. And so we're going to get into here right now. We're going to talk about, how to take products to market, essentially. And and so Armando is one of the Works for Creative Works, which has expanded their reach into really becoming a really good, what I'm going to call a value-added reseller, because as opposed to a distributor like somebody like Betson or Player One, where they take a product and they connect the product to the market from a sales standpoint and maybe support and service, you guys take products that sometimes are 80 or 90% ready for market, and then you take your experience and add them and finish them and then bring them to market, and then you also do manufacturing or assembly. And so you're taking core technology that might not be ready to market, and finishing it and packaging it in a way that is magic. And I think that for operators that are either looking at products, we're going to get into some kind of selection criteria. What do you look for if you're not experienced with VR? And then we'll talk a little bit about if you're a solution provider, like what are you probably missing? And so some of those, and we'll use some of the use cases of products you've brought to market. And let's just start with Hologate. So and so Hologate, so 2017 EAS. So you went to the Euro Attraction show and you saw a Hologate. What did you see there? What did you think? And what did you know was missing when you saw that product?
So to give you a little perspective on that, we had been looking to enter into the VR market for about a year prior to going to EAS and creating a relationship with Hologate. And a lot of that actually, if we go back to that 2016 IAAPA, is because of you. And what was happening in the marketplace was zero latency, right? We saw it was a good product that had some potential, and we wanted to see, what other things were out there. Did we want to try and develop something in-house? Did we want to do, like you said, find a product that was part of the way there and help it get the rest of the way? And what were those things that we were looking for? But at the same time, we wanted to take our spin, our experience, and what were the things that we didn't like about the offerings that were there, zero latency or otherwise. And so that kind of sets up that premise. And we had gone and played with and viewed dozens of different products, at that time. And we went to EAS and we just happened to be walking by, and they had a 2-player setup. So it wasn't even their full functioning piece. And I don't know if this is just a difference in European culture from like a trade show standpoint, but like these guys are like lounging on couches and just like, much more nonchalant compared to, what we're used to seeing at, somewhere like IAAPA here in North America. And that was my first EAS, that I'd ever been to. And it wasn't specific to just Hologate. I mean, that's kind of how, some of the different places were. But the biggest thing that really attracted us to it is that it solved a problem that we had not seen anybody else really fully solve. And they really designed the attraction with a little bit of sex appeal, right? With an attractiveness that we really hadn't seen, and with some openness that, again, we really hadn't seen, of other products that we had tested in the market. And it still needed a lot of polish. Don't get me wrong. Things that cable management, where you put certain pieces, adding lighting effects, a lot of things like that. But it was the most complete product from that standpoint that we had, remotely come across.
Yeah.
To that point when we, first saw Life and Robert at EAS.
And so when you saw it, though, like, I know you knew that there was work that had to be done, right? So so you saw it, and it was, just coincidentally, like, so you saw it, and I told them to look for you guys because I thought right away, like, because I was doing some work with them at the time on go-to-market strategy, and they were like, well, how do we get this to market? And I'm like, you guys are not prepared to sell this into the amusement industry. You need a partner, you need a distributor, right? And you guys were the first ones that came to mind. And so when you saw it, what did you have to do? What was lacking? Like, and think about somebody who's watching this, maybe, that thinks they have a product that's ready for market, right? And it's the 20%, 10% that's the difference between a shitty show and a great show. And you guys had a great show at IAAPA. So what was that 10 or 20% from your perspective?
So for example, an easy thing that we've seen and that I alluded to was cable management. There were certain parts of it that they got right and other parts of it they got wrong. One thing that I still think Hologate has done better than anybody else has been how we've engineered, and it's evolved over time, the cable management for the actual tether, right, to the headset, making sure that, you're not strangling or providing the opportunity for your guests to get strangled, so to speak, by the cord as they're getting, immersed in the experience and running around. But, how they have their computers, how that was like, they were looking at it from this is a cool techie kind of a thing. They were looking at it from that perspective of, I'm a computer gamer. Robert's background is in esports himself. He's a, rather celebrity in certain circles from that standpoint. And they were looking at it from that factor. But then I was like, what do we need to adjust for cleaning this up so it's got a finished look, so that it could go into a place like what we did originally right away, to a place like Andretti's, right? If I'm going to have to put this into a high-end, nice-looking facility, what does it need to look like? What does it need to do that needs to be a little bit different? And how do we just dress up those little details? So it was more than just the interactive lights that were, part of the game, but how do I compete with the other arcade pieces, right? Every 100-piece arcade that they have has millions of LED lights in it, right? And they're flashing, and there's noise, and there's all these things just grabbing for everybody's attention. And so one of the first things we did is we need to add 12 more special effect lights to this, right? We need to dress up the coloration on the components. We need to have a better user interface that isn't just a tablet that is able to be broken or accessed, by somebody, or as simple as I can't tell you how many products that we looked at before, or even that are still out there, where I have access to unplug things. How is that even possible, in a retail environment, that I could unplug your system?
Because kids love to deconstruct stuff and put it back together, right? What happens if I pull this cable? Yeah, right.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is, like you said, then all of a sudden you have, the operator who's like, this doesn't work. Well, it's because they unplugged the monitor, right? Or they turned it off, right? Even preventing them from having access to the power button, is something relatively simple that needs to be thought through from that standpoint, and that we really drove home. And then we got to play it, right? I mean, that was one of the first things that makes a huge difference when we got to play it that first time. And I was there with my wife, and who knows nothing. She's never done VR before, right? So that was actually her first time doing VR, was at EAS, and we tried out half a dozen or so other products as well with Hologate. And just her reaction as that mom, as that, borderline millennial to Hologate compared to others, we already knew there was a difference, because you have to realize that in a lot of entertainment venues, it's mom that's making the purchasing decisions to go to a venue. And so you need something that's going to appeal to both genders, from a demographic standpoint. And the fact that she enjoyed it was awesome. And then I think the most interesting part, as we were evaluating them and still another company at the time, was watching somebody in a wheelchair play, right? And having video of that, and the fact that somebody with a disability was able to come up, play, completely just smiles, having a good time, giggling out of that. We knew that it had something, and we just had to help them, make those little bit of tweaks to get it, like you said, across the finish line.
It's really interesting. I don't know that accessibility is something we talk about enough in the industry. And a guy at the Blue Loop conference in Amsterdam recently did a whole session around accessibility, or lack thereof, and lack of empathy for people that are challenged as far as being able to get in and out of attractions or around family entertainment centers and stuff like that. And I think oftentimes as operators, we're focused, or solution providers, focused on meeting the letter of the law, without actually thinking about what is it like for these people, because technically it's a small percentage of the market, and you tend to design things for the bulk of the market. So yeah, it's a really good point. I'm glad to hear you talk about that. So so you get to IAAPA, right? And so IAAPA, you guys had one of the most successful IAAPA shows that I'm aware of. I've been in this industry for a long fucking time. And you guys sold 70 or so units at debut at IAAPA. What was it about that? Because I tell people, like, this year at IAAPA, there was a lot of VR there, and a lot of my clients launched, and I'm like, don't think you're going to do that. That was a bit of lightning in a bottle. What do you think it was that that led to that success, and what advice do you have for companies bringing products to market that they're missing? Because I know since then you've been looking at other products, and we're going to talk about some of the products that you've taken on here in a minute. So let's start with IAAPA, but then think about what was it that was special, and what might companies learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's almost like Shark Tank at times with the people that are like, hey, can you do the same thing that you did for me for them, right?
Yeah.
All the time. I think there was a combination of factors that took place at IAAPA in 2017 that was a little bit of lightning in a bottle, so to speak, as far as a product launch. And I think first and foremost, VR was hot as a topic. People were looking for VR products, but there was a lot of VR there in 2017. I think when I was reviewing an article by, I think it was like Kevin Williams, it's like, hey, in 2017, there were like 60 VR products on the show floor. And in 2018, there was almost 100. So there's obviously a lot more that grew based on, I think, partially our popularity, but there was still a lot of VR there. I think one of the things that made it so attractive to everybody at IAAPA in 2017 for us, in part, first and foremost, was comfort and security. Most of the people that were offering products off of the floor were brand new companies. They, they hadn't installed any, even though we hadn't either. But they were, who's going to support my product that you're asking me to spend tens of thousands of dollars on 6 months from now?
Yeah.
Who says you're going to be in business 6 months from now if you weren't in business 6 months ago? I think was a large part of it. And I think another part of that was we really tried to address a couple key points with Hologate that, compared to everything else at the time, that nobody else was really addressing. First and foremost, we wanted it to be attractive, which I mentioned earlier, because if you look at something like zero latency, as fun as that experience is, and I enjoy it, it's hidden behind a wall. Right? There is just a big wall. It's similar to laser tag, and we fight that with laser tag, and we're always looking for new ways to improve that, but it's completely hidden behind a wall that you can't see what's going on there. So if you've got a product that is, let's say, unknown to the general public, you need to make it as accessible as possible for them to understand it so that they're willing to do it. Because by human nature, we want to do things that we know, that we're comfortable, especially if we're spending our money on it. And so trying to make it as is readily available and understanding of what it was a huge design piece that set Hologate apart from everybody else. And then on top of that, with that same, kind of mindset, most locations are trying to put this into an arcade. Well, because of that, they need to have line of sight. They need to know that I put this big, VR attraction in the middle of my footprint, that I can still see the big bass wheel on the other side, right, of the arcade or whatever that attraction might be, or my laser tag or my go-karts or whatever the case is. So providing that open floor plan that nobody had done up to that point, I think was really, really imperative to making it a good presentation. Sorry, let me go ahead and kill that. Sure, my do not disturb on my desk phone.
Business never stops.
It never stops. Yes, fail, Russ. Thank you. It's one of those things that the other piece that we did there was, up until that point, every VR attraction for the most part had been designed to be a really long experience, right? Zero latency was pushing a 30 to 60 minute experience, right?
Yep.
And we took more of the arcade style approach, and we went with, a 5, an 8, and a 10-minute option is what we had at debut for Hologate. And that idea that I can get a faster throughput, I can get more money on a per minute basis, especially compared to other VR products when you're looking at a typical VR arcade, and charging,
whether it's like 50 cents a minute or 30 cents a minute, and you guys are getting, up to $2 a minute, which I think is, I've been saying all along, like, price points need to be higher. And yeah,
correct.
Thank you.
And we got clients getting as high as, $3 a minute. So it just depends on where you're at and understanding the value of your product, and that consumers are willing to pay it if the experience is worth it, right? And so dressing up, I think that was kind of the lightning in the bottle, was the faster throughput. It was the open design and layout. It was the comfort in knowing that a company like ours was willing to back the product, support it, service it. We've obviously already had a support department with hundreds of laser mazes and laser tags and golf courses, all with electronics already in place. So they knew that, and many of them were our existing customers. They came to us like, I'm looking at these other VR products, but I don't know them from Adam. Yeah. I know you've taken care of me. I feel comfortable spending this with you.
I want to hit on that, because this is one of the things I know these guys don't understand, because until you experience it, it's hard to comprehend. And especially in tech, where new companies seem to explode on the scene, right? And there's the whole overnight success, the band that toured in their van for 20 years, and all of a sudden they look like they've exploded out of nowhere. But the reality is they've been slogging it. I think in the amusement industry, the challenge has been operators are really, really hesitant to buy from new companies, because there's a lot of companies that look at the amusement industry and they stick their toe in the water and they don't sell anything, and then they piss off and leave because they didn't have overnight success, right? And so operators generally will wait to see, are you here next year? Are you here next year? Are you here next year? And companies don't have the money to sit around and wait for people to buy their products 2 or 3 years. And that's why I think that distribution relationship is really key in partnering with somebody who's got the trust, who is going to be there. And that was part of my advice to Hologate was, you guys are going to slog it out for years, even if you have an amazing product. And I told Life afterwards, I said, I know you think you had a great success, and, there's always tension in relationships, right? When you have success, it's like, oh, did I give away too much? Or how much was that mine? How much was it with them? My guess, and this is a wild ass guess, is had they gone to the show on their own, they might have sold 10. And this is my opinion. I have no data to back this up at all, but the partnership of you and them together is what blew it out of the water. And so
I think there's definitely a lot to be said about that. And then even if we look at IAAPA that we just had, where we again blew it out of the water, again, you do have, like you said, we had certain customers in the first year that were willing to take a risk on a new VR attraction, so to speak, as a relatively new entrant into the market, because of their comfort level. And then we had a lot of people that purchased this year because, okay, I've seen that it stayed around for a year. I've seen that they come out with 3 additional games, over that time period. I've seen that from my conversations with other clients that it's done well and that it's actually performed. And I'm not just getting, like you said, captive numbers from a single location or two locations that are going to be outliers because, like you said, they're in their backyard. They're spending all that time there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Russ just said, early adopters paving the way for market legitimacy. And there's this whole, if you're not familiar with the crossing the chasm model, and you're a solution provider, you should get that book and understand it, because we're getting into now these, these fast followers and pragmatists. And for pragmatists to buy a product, and I'm not sure if that's the language the word they use, that might be my word, but these are the guys that, they want to see proof, like they want to see numbers. And one of the challenges I think that zero latency had was, trying to, you get 20 units out there, that's enough. Like, where are the numbers, right? And this is one of the things, I think Life did a good job of showing in a couple of weeks ago. It's like here's the numbers, like here they are. And I think you put that on your website too. It's like here's what we're doing. And I think that makes people more comfortable that, all right, this isn't just a bunch of hype and bullshit. So
I think numbers is a key point that you mentioned there. Is like, and even then, you've got to be careful. Is some people will throw big numbers out there, but did you do the math on the numbers that they put out there, right? Did you actually calculate out, like, how many plays does that really mean? Mm-hmm. What would that ROI be? What is that time frame for it? And so you also need to be careful that when a company touts numbers, that they actually pencil out in a positive manner. And don't hurt them either when you actually take more than them at face value. From that point.
So now I know since then you and I have had some conversations about other VR, and we'll move into Voxel and mixed reality and some of that other stuff. So what I know you've been looking for, I'm assuming, I don't know this, but I'm assuming a free roam solution, right? So you guys are in the laser tag business. There's a lot of, free roam stuff out there. And we had a conversation recently where you said you've been looking, but nothing really blown you away. What is it you're looking for? And specifically that you're not seeing?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things as we've, looked at all of the different, free roaming concepts, whether it's a PvP player versus player experience, or even a PvE environment, escape room type experience. We looked at the platform version, for example, right? And the pieces that I think one of the biggest things that's been missing so far has been throughput. Has been something that a lot of locations and a lot of products have just not really seriously looked at. Yeah. And as soon as start to try and stress test them in any meaningful manner, they get very flustered. And that can make a huge, huge difference in how that product presents, because it doesn't matter at the end of the day if the experience was good. If I can only get 2 sets of people through it in an hour because it takes me 15 minutes to turn over a group, I've already lost. I'm never going to see that ROI pencil out from that standpoint. I think that has been a huge issue from that standpoint. The other thing that I've felt kind of maybe underwhelmed about is been that some location or some products have either gone for a very high graphical, which has been great. Others have gone for very poor, but they're not focusing as much on the core, just fun gameplay. So I'm hopeful, and I want to try out the new Zero Latency. I know that you just recently got to play its new game and seems to have some positive, reaction to it. And I've not touched that yet, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah. By the way, Thursday I've got a special edition of this with Tim Roos, live from Melbourne from the Zero Latency office, and we're going to be talking about all the Zero Latency stuff. So share this with this link with your friends and make sure you're on there, because it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that from that standpoint, it's just like you've got to have that fun experience. And for example, you and I were at was it EAS last year where we went and we got to try Neurogaming's new multiplayer version, right?
Yep.
And that was probably the most fun that I've had in a free roam experience. It was really, really good. That said, they also suffered from that same throughput scenario, right? I mean, getting the sensors on your feet, getting them on your hands, getting them on, it took forever to rotate a group over. Now that can all be solved, but they're not being
solved with more equipment. And this is the thing that drives me crazy. So I talked to the guys at that are going to be at Amusement Expo, Vex, right, which was one of the other ones that we did at EAS. And
we did that one here,
And they had 4 backpacks and 1 spare, and it's a 4-player system, but it's all backpacks. And I'm like, put 4 more fucking backpacks on the wall so you can get 4 people suited up while 4. Like, those are the early laser tag lessons that you'd think 25 or 30 years later people would understand, is the incremental cost of a backpack and a headset, during peak hours is made up by the fact that you can get 3 or 4 more games in a day at least by having that incremental turn, and take some of the pressure off the employees. And it drives me crazy that people don't put enough equipment into the setup.
And that that's made it definitely difficult, right? I mean, it's made it definitely difficult. The other thing is, look, I understand that there's also elements of needing to recoup cost and development time and a lot of the R&D that goes into some of the content that's made. But it's also a little bit amazing at times and of what those prices are that they expect the product and the market to bear. And this won't make sense, right? Because when somebody actually does the math and says, hey, if I can get 3 turns an hour or 2 turns an hour of people based on my game length of 4 players, and I can only charge X amount of dollars, how many plays is it going to take to actually earn my money back? And if you can't show that your product is going to get that ROI on average, let's say in that 12 to 14 month time period, as far as a gross ROI, then your model's already broken. Because that's what a lot of entertainment venues are looking for. It doesn't always have to be that way, but it needs to be pretty close. And you'll have outliers that go longer and outliers that go shorter, right? That will always happen.
But the bulk of the market are looking for that ROI, absolutely. Because ultimately, you're not competing with other VR solutions. You're competing with Big Bass Wheel, right? And so, like an FEC operator is going to say, I've got this square footage and this money. I could put in a VR attraction, or I could put in 8 more redemption games. Now, this dirty little secret in the industry is those redemption games aren't going to bring in new dollars, right? It's just going to shift money from one game to another, and then they're going to look at the ROI for that game and say, ooh, I got my money back, and they're going to make themselves feel good about the purchase. Where the reality is, for me, is I know that VR brings in new dollars, and that's why Dave & Buster's did so well with their attraction, their Jurassic World Atoll attraction, because it brought in accretive revenue that went right to their bottom line. It was new money.
Well, and you said the right word. It's an attraction. Is you can't look at VR and you can't expect it to always run like just an arcade game. You need to look at it like it's an attraction. Now, will there be successful VR arcade products? Look at Rabbids. It's amazing. It's doing great numbers. It's a really good product for what it serves its purpose. But you need to make sure, if you're designing a larger scale product, that it's treated like an attraction, that it's priced like an attraction for the experience that the guest is going to, willing to pay, and that they're getting the right value out of it, that they want to come back and play it again. Right? They want to have a good time. And I think that's the other part that's been interesting when we've looked at whether it's be other small footprint, free roam, or other VR experiences, is realizing that we are social beings, right? Humans by nature are social. And again, that's one of the things that when we first met with Hologate, that was completely different than anybody else. They were the only ones with TeamSpeak communications out of any product that we tried, right? So that ability for me to talk shit to my wife, right, because I was shooting the aliens faster than her, or for her to talk shit to me, or in any group setting, that is huge to create that social dynamic that still a lot of other products, they're relying on you just to yell loud enough over the speakers that are part of your headset. Right? They're not building in a communication system into their platform. And I think that's a huge mistake.
So let's talk about some of the other stuff that you've brought to market. Now you've got 2 new products you launched at IAAPA. I'm not going to get into the escape room thing because that's not my jam. but you did the let's talk about Voxel. It's one of my clients, and I love those guys. So, which was kind of like this mixed reality thing. And by the way, let's see, I think you gave me a little bit of there's something here I can pop up on the screen just to show people what we're talking about.
So Voxel, and the reason that we looked for, Voxel and really liked their product offering is that as we're looking to add to our mix, one of the things that happens in VR is that a lot of people haven't played it yet, right? There's still so much of the market that's not played VR. And because of that, there's a level of intimidation, especially amongst a younger demographic and a female demographic at times, to want to put on a headset that completely blocks out their ability to see the world around them, right? They're just not comfortable in that transition. And so one of the things that really attracted us to Voxel was this idea that I can put on these 3D glasses. I can still have this level of immersion with the cave system, providing, objects coming at me, and get that level of 3D capabilities, but I can still see my friend. Yeah. I can still see what's coming up around me. And it's a level, it's almost, I hate to use this term, it's like a gateway drug, right? But that's what it is. For that person that was potentially intimidated about VR, a system like Voxel allows them to take a taste in a less intimidating platform, that the next time they do see VR, whether it's ours or anybody else's, they may be more willing and more apt to give it a go because they had an enjoyable experience in a less threatening manner, right? If we're going to call it, more like that, what that is.
Yep, absolutely. And this is something I talk about at a consumer level. My prediction is that AR is actually going to be the gateway drug to VR. Everybody, they talk about the hype cycle, right? Where VR has kind of gone through the hype cycle, and now AR is going through it. And everybody thinks AR is going to be bigger than VR, but Mark Andreessen said, and I totally agree with him, that VR is going to be 10,000 times bigger than AR. It's just going to take time. And so once we get smart glasses, we're used to wearing these smart glasses and getting this information fed right in our field of view. It's actually going to be easier for us to put on a VR headset and stay in VR. And AR is going to be the thing we take with us, like the travel mug, right, of the coffee as we leave the house. But VR is going to be the coffee pot. And I just made that metaphor up, and it's terrible, so I apologize. But and so I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, as this is kind of like the on-ramp to VR. What's your early experience been with it? How's it doing? How many sites is it in?
So we've got in a handful of locations, and more coming. The 4-player unit has done better in the locations that have put in the 4-player units. I think just because, again, you just get a larger social experience. And we only really created a 2-player version because one of the complaints that we've occasionally had on Hologate is, man, I wish you had a smaller version, right? At times. And most people end up finding the space anyways. But what we're finding is we've only sold one 2-player version, right? Everybody else is buying 4-player units. They want the capacity, they want the throughput, they want that experience. And then it becomes that much more of a dynamic of a social experience, because most people don't go to an arcade or a venue or an entertainment center. It's just a pair anyways. Most of the time in a social environment, there's a group of 4, 6, 8 people, and having the ability for all of us to enjoy that experience together from a capacity standpoint makes it more willing to do it, because I don't have to tell the 2 of you to go wait. Right? If all 4 of us can go in.
Yeah. And one of the things, the statistics, but all the research backs up that people want. So they want VR to be a social experience. And the reason that VR hasn't taken off in the consumer market is because it's isolating, and it's one of the many reasons, but that's one of the big ones, is it doesn't deliver what customers need. And customers want social experiences. And so I think, 4-player, absolutely. Great data.
Here's the thing, whether it's VR, mixed reality, I know we're going to talk about esports, you need to realize that your product is not VR. Your product is not AR. It's not laser tag. It's not bowling. It's not whatever it is. Your product is that experience, that memory, right? And so you need to do everything you can to create that memory that is hopefully positive, that's going to make them want to come back into your venue and to do it again.
Absolutely. And so the thing, like, this idea of making memories into products is fascinating. And it's part of this whole experience economy that we're in.
That's what we do. Yeah.
And the whole reason that Instagram is so popular is because it allows people to take experiences and turn them into products and share them with their friends. Like, that's what Instagram's about at a really deep level. And so, So one of the things I've been hammering really hard is mixed reality, right? And so, but not in the voxel sense as much, though it does give you some context. You can see what people are doing in the environment. But from a VR standpoint, how do you guys feel about the Sandbox announcement and what's going on with mixed reality and Live and Blueprint? And is there any plans to integrate that into your VR products?
So we're actually looking at quite a bit from a mixed reality, and we've got a couple products that over this next course of the year, unfortunately, I can't spill the beans yet on, that's going to incorporate other components for sure. And we're even looking at ways, as you mentioned earlier, on our core product that we grew up on that was still a good chunk of our business, from a leadership standpoint in the market, is laser tag. Is how do we also incorporate some of this technology into the laser tag experience beyond the fact that out there right now you just have targets on a wall. And yes, we can have video bases and monitors and that kind of stuff, but how do I make it a much more living experience, interactive experience? And that's going to be how that, I think, is going to evolve over time as well, that we're also doing R&D on.
So let's talk about esports. So there's been a lot of talk about esports. And by the way, if you haven't made a decision yet to come, I'm going to share in the chat window the Amusement Expo brochure. I highly recommend coming. We're going to be doing a panel on esports, and we've got some of the leading minds in the esports and the location-based esports market coming, talking about how do you run esports within a venue. And Armando is going to be there. So talk about this. What the fuck is this?
So it's funny. So esports is a very, very broad term that, pretty much anybody likes to slap, on anything, right? Realistically right now, because it's such a buzzword, right? It's such a key word at this point. But basically the idea or the premise on the more professional, traditional term is, no different than you have the NFL and you've got organized, teams competing for the grand prize at the end of the year, Super Bowl, Lombardi Trophy, and money as a player. The same way esports, is functioning is basically there are different leagues, and within those leagues, they're sometimes isolated to games or a series of games, and these teams are competing for real money. A lot of times it's easy for people to go like, what do you mean you're just making money off of video games and playing? And they write it off as something nonsensical. But at a trade show, for example, that was taken on Tuesday at IAAPA for that picture. That's a trade show where there's not supposed to be any kids on the floor. Mm-hmm. And then magically, every kid, that was available on that trade show floor started to sit at our esports table for hours, right? We almost became babysitters to a certain extent because they are playing these games and they're able to do so competitively, and some of them are making careers out of it. There's multiple, Division I schools offering full ride scholarships for esports now, no different than what you would for, any other more traditional sport. Yep. And I think that's what we're seeing as a pop culture explosion and interaction of esports that people are wanting to now bring into their centers to provide avenues for interaction and competition that people can train on, experience on. The biggest thing that when you do bring that in is you've got to offer them something they can't get at home.
Yep.
Right. So your setup's got to be better than what they can get. The experiences, the social dynamic that I can be next to my buddy as opposed to, down the street from them, so we can interact in better ways. They've got to be able to get customized skins or access to games that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, or for instance, with our platform, League of Legends, Champions and whatnot, they're all unlocked. So while you're playing there, you can play as anything that you may not have had the skill set to unlock yet.
And I think that's
but you're YouTube, you're seeing they're playing.
I want to dig into that because that's been the thing. Like a lot of companies have talking about esports, but like, why do you want to play out of home? And I think that that's a key value proposition that's lost on people. So talk about what GG Leap brings to the table and how it's different than just putting a bunch of games on a computer.
Well, and so, for example, and just understanding the premise of like what a game like Fortnite is. Fortnite is a free-to-play game, right? It's a multiplayer experience. It's this battle royale. Think Hunger Games, right? Everybody gets dumped in and one person gets to win.
Yep.
And it's free-to-play, but yet as a free-to-play game, they made more money than Netflix last year, right? Just on that property, because people are buying the customization, the skins, the unique levels. If you play for 1 million hours and I play for 10 hours, our characters have the same power, but it's aesthetics. It's the personality that you can apply to the skins, the coloration of your guns, your character, their outfits, etc., that people are spending hard-earned money on to set themselves apart. And that is what has created that driving cultural influence amongst that demographic that's playing. And then that's where then, again, why do they want to come in and why do they want to play at your center? Our project with creating this platform with GG Leap, one of the key benefits is that they have connections due to scale that we're able to work with them on with a company like Epic to offer a game like Fortnite so that when they're playing Fortnite at your venue, they get access to playing in that tournament and getting a custom skin that they can't pay $10 for. They can't get at home on their Xbox or they can't get at home on their PC. They can only get that access code by coming to your tournament, playing in it, and being a part of that experience at your venue. Yeah. And then you have all those other ancillary, income streams that you can get by the fact that they're there. And that they now have awareness of the other things that you have at your venue, other attractions, your offerings, et cetera. So that is a way that it can help drive people in through this platform and through this value proposition that you can't get if you just put a bunch of computers on a desk, and expect them to want to play.
Yeah, and so this picture here, I'm assuming, is this the setup you guys did at Andretti's?
No, this one is actually at Urban Air in South Lake, Texas. Wow. And then we're actually rolling out. We're installing literally as we speak to 3 GameWorks locations right now as well. They announced our partnership and whatnot, and updating their venues. So we're installing in Lexington and Minneapolis and Schaumburg, the Chicago area, literally right now at all 3 venues.
Any early returns from any of these? I know it's early, but any data or numbers or stats that you can throw out?
Not really that I'm at liberty to share yet, from that standpoint, but it's really drawing, when you have an aesthetic like this, that person who may not have ever even otherwise thought to consider playing a game out of home, it is drawing them in, and then it's wanting them to come back and play more. And when you look at a company like GameWorks, they've had, as somebody mentioned, they've had esports for years. Yeah. Like they've already had that integrated into a model of somewhat similarity to a Dave & Buster's. It's a food and bev and an arcade model, right? Yeah. And they've added that in, and now it's continuing to grow as esports popularity is growing. And they're trying to revamp those locations to provide them a better experience. So they just switched to the GG Leap platform across all their locations as well.
So by the way, Mark Nielsen from GG Leap, I did a quick live video with him at IAAPA. He used to work with me at Global VR back in the early 90s, late 90s, and he's the CMO for GG Leap, and he agreed to come speak at Amusement Expo, and now he's avoiding my call, so I need you to ping him.
I'll get Zach to yell at him too.
Is he coming to Amusement Expo? Do you know? I know he's a good guy. Yeah. All right. Cool. So I want to get him on our esports panel because he knows more about this shit than anybody I know. Like he was the guy that actually created the LAN Gaming Association and got all the publishers to license their games to LAN gaming centers who were all running unlicensed software because they couldn't actually get licenses. And so he helped legitimize that whole business. So he's been in this space for 25 years, and I'd love to get his thoughts on it. Do you guys have that with Fortnite? Like, so I know Fortnite's the big game. Do you guys does GG Leap give the ability to do all those unlocks with Fortnite?
They've already run multiple tournaments. Where Fortnite and Epic, they're giving away $25,000 right in prize money. Now, that doesn't mean that a single player is walking away with 25 G's, but you might, by winning your tournament or winning at your center, you might walk with a couple of $100, right? Yeah. That providing from that standpoint, along with that access of having that custom skin, to your character or gun that you can now take home and have as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is key with this is, we think about who our competition is on the operator side, right? And I've heard some really savvy operators realize that their biggest competition right now is Fortnite.
Yeah, that's what Netflix. I mean, if I look at the comments, so Netflix's CEO came out and he said, my competition is not Hulu
or Amazon Prime.
It's esports and games like Fortnite.
Yeah.
And then you have new games that just came out, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, where Respawn and EA dropped Apex Legends, right? Yeah. And for the month of January or for the first month, it dropped Fortnite's revenue by 48% in a single month.
Yeah.
So there will always be these evolving things. So what you want is a partner when you try and integrate something like this that can keep up with that and provide you that product. And that's what we work very hard with GG Leap on, for example.
Yeah, and the thing, like, to get back to just last thing on Fortnite for me is, for those of you that don't know, people are looking at, like, what's the next big social network, and actually Fortnite actually is the next big social network. And there's a quote from the guy that wrote, there's a great book called A Brand New World, and it's from the former CMO of Nike and Starbucks, like, pretty good resume, right? And he talked about when they were at Nike and Michael Jordan's career was fading and they were looking for the next Michael Jordan to come out of the basketball world. What they didn't understand was it was going to come out of the golfing world, and it was Tiger Woods. And so I think a lot of people are looking at what's the next social network like Facebook, and they didn't expect it to come out of the gaming world, which is Fortnite. And the example I'll give is Marshmello, who's a DJ, for those of you that don't know, recently did a live performance as a character in Fortnite, and they had 10 million people in Fortnite watching that live. And so, like, it's become the place where kids go to hang out and interact with their friends. And so as an operator of location-based entertainment, that's your competition, is how do you get kids away from their tablets and their phones and their computers and their TVs, because it's available everywhere, and into your venue.
Well, I think to take it a step further, it's not necessarily Fortnite, because Fortnite itself isn't the platform. It's going to be the platforms like Xbox Live and PlayStation Network that allow that communication and that interconnectivity between those hundreds of millions of people that are playing on those platforms. And because it could be Fortnite today, it could be Apex Legends tomorrow, it could be whatever that new game is down the line from that standpoint. And one of the things that people don't get on esports is we are early, right? We are still early. So it doesn't mean that I can or anybody can put in an esports in every venue across America and make gobs of money. That's not going to happen. If that's your expectation, you're wrong. And we're the first people to admit that.
Who is esports right as an operator? Who is this right for?
So you need a venue that has a high population density, that has a high throughput in traffic, and you need somebody that is going to put in an actual person to manage that product, to advertise, to handle the tournaments, handle the marketing of it. And you've got to be willing to do it. It's not going to be something where it's I will put it in and they will come scenario. That will never work with a platform like this. You've got to be creating all these tournaments, running these tournaments and bringing them in. And then like, Sean is putting in there, you have these platforms like Twitch and Discord that can be used for communication and also broadcasting these, right? And Twitch is ubiquitous for obviously broadcasting, gaming content. Xbox Live has it built into their platform now, right? And that ability for esports to really seep into every part of our life is amazing. And what a lot of people don't realize is esports, for example, viewership of esports was higher last year than the total viewership for the NFL's regular season games.
Yeah.
Not for playoffs, not for everything else, but for the regular season viewership, esports eclipsed that as a whole. And that is massive. That is absolutely massive that a lot of people just don't get. but you have to then, as Janice pointed out, you got to manage, you got to moderate, you've got to, really handle that attraction. It's not a hands-off approach if you're going to do esports.
Yeah, there's a guy, Steve Grubbs, who I follow on LinkedIn. If you're interested in esports, follow him. And he is also in my mentoring group, which is a good segue. I'll put that link. If you're not in my Facebook mentoring group, go ahead and join. And Armando's in there, and Steve Grubbs is in there. Steve Grubbs runs a business called Paradigm VR in Davenport, Iowa, and he's been running now a VR esports location-based center. And he just published a great article on LinkedIn and you can just search for him on LinkedIn and look at his activity, and you'll find it was like 6 lessons for esports. And he's going to be at a music expo, by the way, on the esports panel. And he talks about, it's like that consistency. You've got to run a tournament every week. Like, he's running weekly tournaments. It's like, you can't just
more than one tournament as well. Like, I mean, in more than one game type. You can't open that venue and expect to only play Fortnite. You've got to be doing Overwatch. You got to be doing Dota. You got to be doing League of Legends. You got to be doing Rocket League. You got to be doing FIFA, right? And you've got to have a knowledge of what those games are, what the demographic for those players are, where they're coming from. As Victor mentioned, being located near college campuses is also another good location and demographic to target too.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I learned doing, I moderated a couple of panels at the Casino Esports Conference last year, and one of the things that was really clear that I learned as a moderator was that, people think esports as a thing, but for the players, there's a lot of granularity, and they all have different requirements. And one of the things I said is, like, the guys that play Super Mario in esports want to play on CRTs because there's something about the refresh of CRT versus LCD that makes it harder to play. And I'm like, so they won't even play in a tournament that's on an LCD screen. I'm like, what? That's crazy. And so starting to understand the different market segments and player segments within esports, because each game is its own sport. And so we think esports is like sports, but that's like saying curling and basketball are the same thing, and it's not. And so the
great analogy.
Sport is really important to understand that. And the other thing I want to throw in, I know I just saw him, Jan Gutluck from Virtuix just sent around some really good statistics about their esports tournaments and what they're learning about repeat play in VR. And I know this is a VR thing, but there is Zero Latency coming out with their PvP, and I know
right. I mean, we're going to have a tournament for Groove Guardians and run that with sponsors and flying people up, because people want that competition. They want to have, and it helps build repeat play and that draw up that, like they're doing Virtuix, where it brings them in and it builds in that ability for that additional revenue that if you're just running your regular game and there's not a reason or is not as much of a reason to play that exact same experience over and over and over again.
Yep.
It makes a huge difference.
And I do want to say that not everybody's competitive. It's a psychographic segment. There's a demographics, which is age and income and stuff like that. But then there's the psychographic segment, which is what's your mindset. And there are certain locations that will do better for competitive games. And one of the ones I call out are karting centers, high-end karting centers. The psychology that people go to a karting center, they're looking to compete. They're competing against the clock. They're competing against their friends. They're competing against the other racers. They're competing against themselves, but it's competition mindset. And so I think, if you're operating a karting center, or you're looking to put a competitive esports product or VR product into a location with a competitive mindset, I would really look at the karting business as a potential great location for that. And I know you guys have a great, relationship with Andretti's, and it'd be interesting to see how that plays out over time. All right, so we're running out of time. I do want to point out, Jan posted his key FEC insights for esports, and I definitely would take a look at that. There was some really good data in that about repeat playability, because like a lot of the questions earlier in the chat were, how do we make it repeat play? How do we get repeat play? How do we get people to come back? And some of the stats that Jan shared around the number of times players played, like the average player played 7 games in their tournament to get on the leaderboard, and the top teams played 14 times to maintain that position. And so I remember back in the arcade games in the 70s, like I used to go back and, you'd go and see where you were on the leaderboard, and you shove some more quarters in to get back at the top to hold that position. So not everybody cares about that, but the people that do care,
where you're stacking quarters, right? And when you're playing those old fighting games and you've got those quarters stacked, and you're just, I want to be next up, and I want to be able to have that competition and test my skill against the guy that was there, before me. Yep. I mean, it's always been there. It's just trying to monetize it into today's world.
Yep. So, all right. So we are, God, I could go on forever. We crammed a lot into this. We're out of time. I like to keep these to an hour. We've actually run a little bit over. For those of you, this will be, as all of them will be up on my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to that, give it a subscribe. There's a lot of interesting stuff going up on the YouTube channel beyond just the replays of the webinars. And I really look forward to seeing people at Amusement Expo. Armando, any last comments?
No, I mean, look out for the future. There's going to be some announcements coming, some really exciting stuff. So I'm really excited where VR
come on,
is going.
Give us something. You got to give me something. Come on, these guys are.
I can't. Be prepared. How's that?
Let's give us something. Give us a segment, a teaser, something. Come on, come on.
Okay, here's the treat. Here's the teaser. While everybody has been trying to play catch up to what we've been doing and mimicking, and imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we're already working on the next thing.
Cool.
And I can't wait to unveil that, where it's really gonna change the experience that people are gonna have.
Awesome. Well, for those of you that don't know, one last shameless plug is I'm running a workshop helping people find distributors. Armando's, you talked about the Shark Tank and the Pitch Fest, and you've heard Armando talk about the fact that like most companies aren't ready when he goes and sees them, and so what I'm trying to do is help companies prepare for having conversations for guys like Armando and Betson and Player One, and Namco. We've lined up a really good list of distributors who are looking for great VR product, and we're going to do a pitch fest as part of this kind of workshop. And so if you're interested, take a look. If you want more information, drop me an email. This is for people who have solutions that they're looking to bring to market, but realize that they might not know what they need to know, might not know what they don't know, and getting it right is hard. And so so I look forward to seeing everybody at IAAPA, that too, at Amusement Expo Wednesday. Tim Roos from Zero Latency. We're going to be talking about their new hardware platform. Big things happening in tracking. I've been talking about that a lot. So they're developing on the Windows Mixed Reality platform, which is a game changer. Inside Out Tracking is a game changer for the industry. And then Friday, I think it's Yoni Koenig from Exit Reality, who are doing some really interesting things in location-based VR as well. So thank you everybody for your patience and joining. Armando, I love you, man.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here and playing with us. And we'll chat offline about Amusement Expo and tighten all that stuff up. And then I'll see you in Vegas.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks a lot.